Welcome to Real Estate Real World, where we talk to the movers, shakers, and leaders that are getting it done right now in the real estate industry and beyond. Your host, Marguerite Crespillo, started this podcast simply dedicated to call people about what's really happening in this crazy roller coaster ride of real estate. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and stay up to date on the newest stuff by adding yourself to the list at www.realestaterealworld.com. Now your host, Marguerite Crespillo.
Hello, everybody. It's Marguerite Crespillo, and welcome back to Real Estate Real World. For those of you who are watching on video, I got my hair pulled back today because it's raining in Northern California, and so it's a bad hair day. So that's the advantage of ponytails. I love it, right? Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I'm excited to have this guest. So what's interesting is I don't go on Twitter very often. I know I'm, trying to figure out all the social media channels, but that one is one that has bypassed me. So I go on occasionally, and I happened to be scrolling through one day and saw this podcast with our friend Paul, and I'm like, I'm curious. So I went through and started checking out some of his posts and comments, and I've listened to a few of his podcasts, and I'm like, I really like this guy. And he's, do you want to be on my podcast? I was like, sure. So I signed up to be on his podcast and got to be a guest on his show. And I said, absolutely, I want to return the favor and have you here. So I'm very excited to welcome. I'm going to jack up your last name, Paul. Hopefully I don't, but it's Paul Indrigo. So if I screwed that up, I'm going to apologize, but welcome to the show. We're excited to have you here.
Marguerite, appreciate that. And there's no wrong way to spell it, especially if you're sending me a check of any kind. So as long as it's spelled right, you can say it however you want.
Oh, I love it. It's funny
it used to kill me to hear my name butchered. And eventually it's just that you just say, what's the big deal? And then I just said a joke about, as long as you spell it right on the check, I have no problem how you say it.
So the funny thing is that my name, Marguerite Crespillo, is 19 letters long, right? So yeah. It's a challenge. And my maiden name was Scuncio.
So no one ever gets my name right. What's the background for that?
I'm Italian, yeah.
You're Italian too, yeah. Okay, I thought with Crespillo maybe, but I wasn't sure if that was the married name or what. But
Crespillo is my married name, and my husband is actually Spanish, not Italian. His parents, he's actually first generation American. His parents were both born in Spain, and so I'm half Italian. My dad was full-blooded Italian. My mom was a mutt, so I'm half Italian, but I seem to connect and relate the most to my Italian side of my family because growing up, my mom was not Italian. So she's always, you're yelling at me, you're yelling. I'm like, I'm not yelling, I'm just talking. And then when I went to Italy in 1999. And I was like, I'm not crazy. I'm just Italian. I fit right in Italy. I was like, these are my people.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, we could go into that all day. But yes, sorry, go ahead.
Are you full-blooded Italian or?
Absolutely, yep, 100%.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Both sides, but my daughter, who is just literally a day away from going to college, a few years ago, decided to do one of those ancestry things on us. And she found out that even though I thought I was full 100%, which both parents are from there, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on in there. So it's a mixed, there's some percentage of my bloodline from Wales. I think there's some Russian. So there's way more to it than I thought. And I just thought both parents are from Italy. So I must be 100%. I might not be giving you the right number. 72
Isn't that
maybe?
Interesting where we did that ancestry and 23andMe too. And it's so fascinating because obviously a lot of people were hopping borders or people were going wherever. And I just find it so fascinating because both mine and my husband's came back very different as well. And both his parents were born in Spain. So his came back with mostly Spain, but then some other mutt stuff in there too. So
hey,
I just think that's how the world is these days. But absolutely. I found it really fascinating. So is your mom like, is she a fabulous Italian cook?
You know what? As far as like my parents and like their cooking, they always were cooking at home, but it was always the relatives. We had relatives that had these Sunday dinners and things like that that were just again way too much to handle, like the 5 and 6 courses. When you're not even 10 years old, you don't want to spend more than 5 minutes at dinner. That, and even before the internet, I
True
could
story.
not get through meal number one or two, and then you had to stay at the table, which always bothered me as far as having to stay there, wait until everybody's done to leave. Yes, of course they were great cooks and made way too much food. And my uncle actually had, if you'll believe this, in his basement, he had a secret room just for the cheese and the meats and the wine. And you couldn't see this. The door looked like part of the wall. You had to push the wall to see the door open. It was like he was worried someone was going to rob him. But it was literally like a secret room full of those big wheels of cheese that
Oh, a man
Italians
after
are
my
famous
own
for.
heart.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh, I would love him. I would love him.
It,
I was
it
just
was it was crazy. It was craziness, and this was me as a kid seeing all this, saying, "Who does this?" It,
I
it
was
didn't make
just
sense.
talking to a friend of mine because I have a huge fig tree, right? And figs
Yeah.
are pretty popular with Italians. And I have this huge fig tree, and my girlfriend was coming over. I'm like, yeah, I've decided I need a root cellar. And she's like, what? I go, I need to have this place dug in the earth because that's what our ancestors did. That's how they kept things cool and kept things from spoiling. So I know we're not talking about anything related to real estate, but I think it's more.
No, that's that. But
And,
that's what I think makes realtors interesting is the other stuff. And we talked about rock music in the other podcast. So wherever you feel like going, again, you're the lead.
but
I'm
I
really just the
love
part.
to cook. And I finally, 2 years ago, we got to remodel our home after 29 years. And I got to build my dream kitchen, which
Oh,
is,
that's
as
amazing.
my mom would call it, a two-butt kitchen. So
I love it.
because
I
you
love
can
it.
fit more than one behind in my kitchen, which was my dream. And
That's
so
that's so nice. That's so great. I'm so happy for you that you got to do that. That's great.
this year my garden took off and was out of control. And I made over 100 jars of pasta, tomato sauce, marinara sauce. And I also made a bunch of jam. I made drunken fig jam and peach jalapeno jam. And because I just enjoy anymore. Like when you go to visit somebody, you bring them a bottle of wine. Well, I don't know what's good wine or bad wine myself. I should probably go hang
Mhm.
out with Gary V and figure it out. But I don't know enough about wine, but I love making little homemade jams and jellies and sauces and stuff like that. So anyway, I digress. But there you go.
Yeah,
That's
I
the
I
Italian
love I
side of me.
love cooking. To me, it's the best opposite. It's getting your hands dirty. It's doing other things. Then this business of ours can ruin your brain because you're
Oh,
sitting
tell me
there
about it.
thinking so much. So if you do something else, building stuff, I built decks, I built playgrounds for my kids, and cooking on the weekends. Literally, I'll do that more than anything. And as I'm cooking, sometimes I'll have these great ideas pop up because I'm doing something completely different than sitting at a screen or thinking about what am I going to do for my fall marketing. And of course, nobody
100%.
wants to hear that story. Yeah.
So let's dive in a little bit. So you
Yeah.
have been in real estate for 23 years?
23 this fall. Yep.
And how did
As
you
we come.
actually end up in real estate? What did you do in your prior life?
Very good question. And it was, for me, it looks, there's no connection whatsoever if you look from the front, from the forward back. But if you look from the other way, in terms of from the back, like from now backwards, it makes perfect sense. And that's not my quote. That's Joe Walsh of the Eagles
Oh,
in the
yeah.
the best movie ever. It's not a movie, it's a documentary, but the movie about the Eagles. And he talks about how he looks back at all the crazy stuff he's done, which if Joe Walsh, you know how crazy he used to ruin
Add
hotels
that to
and
my to-do list to watch that documentary
oh
because
my
I
God, the
love it.
best music documentary I've ever seen. I've watched it probably 30 times. It's that good. So Joe Walsh said, you look back at your life and all of these random events don't make any sense, but you look back at it later on and it looks like a finely crafted novel. So for me, it started off in the fitness business. All I wanted to do was open a gym. My highest marks in school were gym. So when my kids tell me they get good marks, I said, so how did you do in gym? And it's the opposite of every other parent. If you got a 90 in gym, it pulls your average way up. I figured that out early. But I loved it. I loved everything about physical education and fitness. I got through high school. I went into college. I took a few courses in that. But I was working in the gyms from 16 to about 27. So, like a little over 11 years. So, through my teen years, it was formative. And then something happened in the middle of the gym business that sort of changed my life. I had a boss who, I guess I would say, and I think I told you this in our podcast, who did not believe in me at all, and said that I said, I hear the sales guys are doing pretty well. Do you think I could do sales? And he said, you're not really suited for that. You're more of a personal trainer guy. And at the age of whatever it was, 16, 17, it was like it was like being branded, like a cow gets branded. So I had that literally that searing heat feeling, like something just happened. I didn't know at the time what it meant. All I knew was I was going to prove them wrong. So I started selling memberships. I started doing everything I could to prove that I could do it. And then when they just didn't want to give me the chance, I moved to the biggest company in Canada, and I worked for them for many years, and I became the top 10 membership salesperson in the country. And this was probably like early 20s. So right away, sales just made perfect sense to me. And the fitness stuff was great, but I was thinking about a family, I was thinking about a future, and unfortunately, there was no money in fitness. It's pure passion. And if I came from money, I'd still be doing it, but I didn't have any. So I had to figure out my crossroads moment in life. Maybe you had one. So left or right. So left was open a gym and start that life. And then right was try something that I thought I might be good at, which is real estate. And I decided to go right and go into real estate. And that's the story.
It's funny because I had somewhat of a similar story. I was actually working in for home savings and loan back in the day, bank,
Yeah.
and I was an entry level secretary at 22 years old. And I remember I saw the loan officers and I saw their checks and the money they were making. So I went to my manager. I'm like, I want to learn how to do that. He
Yeah.
goes, oh, honey, he goes, you need to work on your typing skills.
Oh, you got it. So
I
you got the same response, and now look at you and look at them. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the good news is it came full circle because a few years back I was at the bank that I bank with, and I had a personal banker in there because I had a big brokerage. And Cody, who is my banker, he goes, "Hey, I want to introduce you to our new investment banker." And it was the same manager who had told me that I should work on my typing skills. I go,
Yeah.
"That's crazy. I remember you."
Oh, wow.
And I told him this story. He goes, clearly I was not a good judge of character, was I? I said, no, you weren't.
That's amazing. That's so cool for you that he remembered that. I never got to revisit this other place or person. It was just a very distant bad memory, but I think it was the moment that I said to myself, I'm going to try something else. And I never knew where it was going to take me, but clearly it got me to be in a place like this right now.
Yeah. And so you've been
Is
23 years in real estate and
Yeah,
you're still here. You're still standing.
still going. Yeah.
And how long ago did you start your podcast and how did that happen? How did that come together?
Good question. I get bored really easily. So that was probably around that time, which is, I was approaching 20 years doing this. And it just felt like my wheels were spinning, but I wasn't really connecting with as many people as I wanted to. And just, I just wasn't in the best place. So I decided that I was going to quote unquote quit doing it the old way, not quit the business, just I had to start something new. So I was listening to a bunch of podcasts and I was thinking, could I do a real estate podcast that would be stuff that I would want to listen to, like about topics that are really going on at the closing table type discussions, like real problems that are happening on the ground floor, because I see them all the time. But again, is this going to be something that, I could even do? I'd never had I'd never been behind a microphone before. I'm still conscious about being on a video. It was just something that I just said, you know what, this is, everything is telling me not to do it. And in my brain, it's, wait a minute, that's exactly what's happened before. meaning that if all the stuff that every time something's, told me buying my first house at 24, everything in my body told me don't do this. But I knew it was the right thing to do. I was scared out of my mind. Again, no one in my family had ever gone through that or had ever done it that way. This was all, I was, whatever it was, second generation. So I was like the first, in this country that sort of had these opportunities. So something in my brain told me I have to do that. So the podcasting thing in 2018 was the same. I went over to the Canada Computers. I'll do a little shout out for them because I spent a lot of money at that store. And they've got a bunch of places all over the city. But I went over there and I looked for the cheapest microphone I could find. So $9 later, I had my microphone. I still have that mic just in case I get famous. Might be worth something more one day, but I bought the $9 mic. I set up some software I guess I had at the time, and I started just storytelling. And I just started telling stories, and all of a sudden, like within the first few episodes, I already started meeting with people in my neighborhood that I have talked to over the years that were really good storytellers. And I said, here, tell me that story again about this and that and the other. And I just made them fill the stories up for me to get the ball rolling. And it just kept going.
It's funny because I started my podcast around, I don't know, I think it was around 2013 or so.
Yeah. 10 years in. Yeah.
And back then we didn't have Zoom. I think Skype was just starting to come out. So we used to do it on freeconferencecall.com.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah, that's a plug for them if they're around. Are they still around?
I think they are still
Probably.
around.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at them. And I did it. It was all audio then. We didn't do video. And I know yours is all audio now for the most part, right?
You know what? It is. And I've been so on the fence about it. So as far as like you were talking about, we're going to talk about the podcasting part of my background. I thought, I was convinced that audio was the way I wanted to do it. And it was, or it has been, but something's pulling me into video and it's totally uncomfortable and I don't want to do it. And that's why I need to do it. It's all the same reasons. I don't want to be in front of a camera. I don't know why I care. I don't at this point. I'm at the age now. I've got 2 kids. I'm an older guy. I'm almost 50. I shouldn't care, but there's a part of me that's, do I look like an idiot on a video? So I just tried to get over it and just say, who cares? It's not about that. It's about connecting with people, and it's about, again, just being able to be a better storyteller. So yeah, I'm crossing over, I guess I could say, into more video. I'm learning as we speak from what you guys are doing, which is, by the way, such a great system. Just leading up to today, I feel like I am in a green room, and I feel like I am like on a talk show, and I do feel like I'm a guest on a huge talk show, because this is.
Thank you. I'm super grateful for my assistants, because certainly this is not all me, right? I get to be the front person, but there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes. And I don't know how to do it. So I'm grateful for Mark and AJ, who've been extraordinary in helping me. But it's a ton of fun and I enjoy it. Like I said, I would have never met somebody like you had I not been hopping on social media and being able to hear podcasts and things like that. So what has been your favorite part of podcasting?
Oh, so this is where it'll hopefully even get better, because it sounds, to me, this already has gone really well. So the thing that got really interesting for me is I come from a competitive background. I started in my teens playing rugby, and I got up to the highest level of rugby playing that I could. By age 19, I made the Ontario under-19 team. So I was extremely competitive coming into the business world, and I remain that way. But the other part about me that has always been there is that right after the rugby game, the first thing you do is you actually, this is tradition, you buy a beer for the opposite number. Meaning that the other guy on the other side who tried to put you in the ground for the last hour and a half, you actually turn around when the whistle blows, you shake his hand, you tell a joke, and all of a sudden, all those bad words, because there was a lot of bad words said during that time, and people trying to, again, put you in the ground 6 feet under. But after that's over, the first thing you do is you go to the pub and you buy a beer for that other number. So the collaboration is the part that I love about podcasting. So that's the connection, is that the fact is, real estate obviously super competitive, and you'll know this from being in the business as long as you have. So I love that part, but I also want to be able to equally sit down across the table, even if it's like this, with the people that I do business with, and have discussions and share our war stories. Not even close to war, but just share our stories and not have any sort of competition thing going on at that level. So the collaboration with podcasting, I've learned so much. And this is just, again, just like I said, I'm learning from you today. But every podcast I've been on, and every time I've had a guest that has just shared with me stuff that, again, I probably have no business. I've had authors on the podcast now, again, agents that are like just a huge weight class above me, and they're doing like $100 million deal agents. Like these guys, they're in a whole different ballpark as far as I'm concerned, but they're willing to come down to just a human level and just have discussions, and not flash the trophy. You know what I mean? Not actually put a trophy in the shot while they're talking. It's like just down to earth, just a couple of us like you and me having a coffee at a coffee shop, and there's a microphone on and a camera rolling.
And those are some of my favorite conversations. Like I've been in business a long time, and I've gone to a lot of events over the years,
Yeah.
conferences and trainings and stuff like that. And without a doubt, every single event, the best conversations are either at the bar, the fire pits, the pool.
Always.
I get more content from
Yes.
those places than usually the actual training that is being provided or the event that I'm at.
100%.
And that's where I really love to dig in and get to know people a little bit. And that's, to me, is the fun part. Like I'm looking at your background back there, and I see your guitars and your Monopoly board. So
Yeah.
What's funny about Monopoly is I used to play with my kids all the time when they were growing up, and I never let them win. I don't think they've ever beat me at Monopoly. I'm like, no, that's not how it goes. They're like, but Mom, you're in real estate. I go, yeah, exactly. So you need to learn how this works. So let's play Monopoly. Is that why you have the Monopoly board on your wall?
You know what? You nailed it. And the fact that I grew up playing Monopoly and making a lot of enemies because I was so competitive, even as a kid, about that game, I knew there was something. This was years later. When I became a parent, I realized, oh, yeah, I remember getting into fights with people, not physical, but like arguments about Monopoly, and say, hey, I see that you're putting some money under the table or something. I literally got upset at people when they were cheating at it. And for me, it's one of those things where, yeah, when I started playing with the kids, the same rules apply. I said, listen, you're never going to win because I'm not going to let you win because you want. When you do win, that feeling you have will be so clear. Like you'll understand why that I never let you win about that, or about running a race or something like that, or an arm wrestling match. I've actually had my kids, because I've actually done competitive arm wrestling as well. So I actually taught my kids how to do it, because I think that's a forgotten school skill. Because
wow, my brother does arm wrestling.
Yeah. Does he really? Okay. So again,
you're going to have to come out to California, and you're going to have to come out and arm wrestle my brother and play Monopoly.
Funny. That is too funny. If the next time I get a chance to that you're on. I don't even need a reason to show up for a rugby match or an arm wrestling match, which again is an art in itself. Just learning how to be, it's a whole other thing. Again, I had no idea what was going on. I thought I was strong, and then you arm wrestle against a bunch of people and you realize it's got nothing to do with that. It's all technique. So again, it was one of those moments. I had to enter a contest to see, okay, how could I do? And I got knocked out the first round. I knew I wasn't going to do well because I'd never practiced. I just thought I had some extra strength, and it was nothing to do with that. So the whole thing about, the Monopoly, playing that, and competition. And weirdly enough, I heard something recently, and I'm trying to recall where I heard it from, but it had to do with the whole thing about why rich people play golf. I forget where I read it or heard it. It was just this week, I think, and I should remember. Probably will after the show. And it had something to do with the fact that if you see how someone plays golf, and if you see that they're a certain way in terms of their character and that they don't cheat while they're playing and things like that, you'll know who to do business with. So playing Monopoly with people as a kid, you got to know who was a good winner and who was a good loser and who was competitive. And again, all these skills of life that a board game, just a simple board game, can bring out.
Well, you know who that George Clooney says before he'll ever do business with anyone, he goes and has lunch or dinner with them and sees how he treats the help.
Oh yeah,
Because
good.
if
Another good point.
they're
Yes.
rude to the wait staff and to the servers, and I was a cocktail waitress for many years. When people are rude to them, it's, I don't know if I want to do
Oh,
business with you, right?
I spent a year in a pizza shop. It is humbling what
Yeah.
people think of you when you're on the other end of that corner, the other side of that counter. They treat you like you're like nothing, like just an absolute, like some people, they just treat you like a complete piece of you know what. And it tells you exactly what they are like in life, especially if somebody's waiting for a pizza. That's one of the big tests. If somebody's like losing their mind over things, like how do they handle business if they can't handle little things like that?
Exactly. So before I let you go today, though, you got to tell me about the guitars because we've heard about everything else. So tell me about
Oh
the
yeah,
guitar.
the guitars basically was again just something that I was 12 or 13, and I just loved music at that point, and I decided that I was going to start learning guitar. I'm trying to figure out which ones are in the view,
You
but
have a red one and a black one.
the red one and the black one. The red one is my first ever real guitar. I had a Sears guitar before that we got from Sears.
Sears. Wow, they're not even around
Sears. They're
anymore,
not
are
even
they?
around anymore. This was a $99 special. And if anybody's a guitarist listening, the reason why I think it was the best guitar ever is because the strings were so far away from the neck that you literally you develop superhuman strength just trying to like figure out a chord. And that's the guitar. I wish I still had it. I don't know why I don't, but that's how I learned, and I learned by ear. And I tried to go to lessons, and because of my, as I mentioned, short attention span, I went to one lesson, and because the guitar instructor wouldn't teach me Stairway to Heaven, I got upset and I quit. And I didn't want to play guitar that way. I didn't want to learn the chords and all that stuff. I wanted to play the song just the way it was on the radio, just the way it was on the record. So I just went home. I started playing my records. And if you remember, if you still have a record player, you know you can play your records on a slow setting.
Mm-hmm.
So you can slow it down. So I used to just slow the record down to a slower setting and listen for the notes, and then try to obviously speed up as I got better. And eventually I started playing to the point where I was good enough to join a band. So I was my first band was in high school with a bunch of my football friends. We got to play on the school concert, the assemblies. We got to play those, and we actually got to play a bar. This was the highlight of my musical career. We played a bar at 16 years old, which in Canada was, I believe, 2 or 3 years before you're supposed to be allowed in a bar. And it was just mayhem. It was craziness. It was all of our friends filling up this bar. None of us should have been there. Not us, not the people watching the show. None of us should have been in this little pub that was a block away from the high school. But one of my friends knew the owners, or knew the father of the owner. And it was one of those moments that was just, again, out of my comfort zone, but I did it. And I've been collecting guitars ever since. There's 2 more on the other side, total of 5, which I think is about all I can handle as far as a collection. But it's one of the funnest things I love doing, again, outside of work and life and parenting and all that other stuff.
Well, that's fantastic. My nephew, my brother, who has done arm wrestling, he's actually a tree guy. So he's like a monkey, he climbs trees. He's
so he's probably crazy strong.
Very
And
strong.
That's exactly who's good at arm wrestling.
And his son is following his dream, and he plays a guitar. And they started a band called Parabellum. And he's 16 years old, so just like you were.
Yeah.
And they just did their first show. They practice out in my storage shed, and they're doing like the heavy metal music. And so they had a show on Saturday that was at like a park fair or something like that. So we went out to watch him and support him and take some video of him. And all of a sudden, all the kids started doing the mosh pit thing, which is not my generation. I was like, what are they doing? Are they fighting? And I was like getting like my mama bear was getting all, and my older son, Jake, he's like, Mom, stay back, sit down. Nobody's fighting. That's So it's been fun to watch him. And he's 16 years old and he's super cute and out there playing. And they have this little band called Parabellum. They're on Instagram. So you guys can follow them on Instagram. They'll be
I love that. I hope this becomes the standout clip of this whole podcast is about this band and how great of a supporter you are for them, because they need that storage shed. They need people talking about them. That's how music starts. And by the way, this is the other part that should come through here. Heavy metal is just fast classical music. A lot of parents don't get it. But when you listen to heavy metal, the chords in heavy metal songs, for example, one of the early heavy metal songs, and this is going to go way off the topics, and then you let me go.
That's okay.
Is Smoke Across the Water is actually I believe it's either Bach or Beethoven song backwards.
Wow.
Yeah, Smoke. I'll send you the link of the video where the guitarist says this. And as soon as he did it and he played it backwards and it was a classical song, I'm like, boom, blew my mind. And I'm like, how many other songs are just versions of classical music sped up with with amplification, with distortion? But that's what a lot of heavy metal songs start as, is classical. So encourage your kids, if you're listening, to learn heavy metal guitar, because they're learning classical in reverse.
We'll definitely be tagging that in this podcast. Awesome. What's that other, and I know we're running long on time, but that's okay. It's worth it. What is that other song where they say that it's the same 4 chords or the same 5 chords or in all the songs? Have you ever seen that mashup? There's like a mashup that these guys do where they play like all of the popular songs have basically the same 4 chords in them. It's pretty fun. I'll have to find it.
I don't know that I don't know that, but I've heard that said by musicians, including Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top. He basically said all their songs are the same 2 chords or the same 3 chords over and over again. You'll never know because of how they play them so differently and so well. But the same 2 or 3 chords is like so many of those great songs. Yeah.
My husband and I, last week, we went with some friends of mine, John and Suzanne, and we went and got to see Loverboy and Foreigner in concert. Right? Yeah. It's like my generation of music. I'm like, there's all these old folks around here. And my husband's like, you're old, honey.
No, that music does not. Again, that music brings you back to when you first. This is why we say, and again, we are going to go over time on this just because it is so good. But the reason why, when the music you hear at a certain stage of your life, when your life is formative, like in your teens and 20s, that's the best music that you're ever going to hear. So if you heard that music, which I did, because for me, Loverboy is Canadian rock, 1980s. That's the definition of Helix and Loverboy, Triumph. These are all the bands I grew up on. So those, to me, and my kids obviously will never get it, like that to me is great music. So if you get a chance, so glad that you got a chance to go support Mike Reno and the boys and Loverboy, and of course all the guys in Foreigner as well. It's, again, these are great bands that are still out there, still putting out the music.
I'm hoping someday I'll see my nephew and his Parabellum band up on the big stages. All my kids are in music. It's fascinating. My son Jake and my son John are both DJs. My son John does they do the EDM music. They're actually going to that big festival, Lost Lands, that's going to be in Ohio in a few weeks. So I'm excited for them. I'm like, go live your life, boys. Have a good time.
That's amazing. Those stories are going to be part of their life, whatever they might end up doing. And it might be that's definitely part of, again, just like we talked about, that's a formative stage. So I'm so happy for them. And they're lucky they got you.
Thank you, Paul, so much for joining us today. It's been a true joy, and I'm looking forward to that Monopoly game one of these days.
Yeah, definitely. I'm up for a traveling Monopoly tour and just going and playing Monopoly in every state if someone wants to invite me. I don't even need a reason, but that would be an awesome idea. We'll videotape it and everything. Yeah.
Thanks again for joining us. This has been a fantastic conversation. Such a pleasure to talk to you. And for all of our guests listening out there, be sure and go check out his podcast, realestatepodcastshow.com, #1 real estate podcast. So I now I have something to compete with. I'm going to have to step up my game, Paul. Here we go.
You know what? Everybody's welcome to be on it. So you don't even have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to, again, be collaborative and be willing to show up to a podcast. And you already did without me having to ask.
There you
more
go.
than one. So thank you for the opportunity to be on this great show.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. And thank you to everybody for joining us on Real Estate Real World, where we get to talk to all the cool people. Be sure to follow us on all the social channels and be sure to tag us and like us and share with all of your friends and family. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us today on Real Estate Real World, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us today on Real Estate Real World, where we talk with masters and leaders in real estate and beyond on how we can raise the bar in our industry. Please subscribe over on iTunes. And while you're there, be sure to give us a review. Your reviews encourage us and help others find our podcast. For show notes and hot topics on what's going on right now in our real estate industry, hop on over to www.realestaterealworld.com and add your name to our email. Thanks again for listening. And go out there, be a part of the elite masterclass in raising the bar on the real estate industry.